with actions. Thank you.
Kevin Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nelson Mandela was not, as some of the comments of the past several days would have us believe, some anodyne, twinkly-eyed grandfather. He was a gracious man, considerate to all those he interacted with, possessing a disarming sense of humour. He understood breaking the cycle of retribution required honesty in order to reconcile for the good of future generations. But under the velvet there was steel. Nelson Mandela was a freedom fighter, a man of great courage, determination and uncompromising integrity. The apartheid regime was not merely racist and repressive. It was evil and murderous, and it survived only through domestic barbarism and through the support of Western governments, including, shamefully, our own, sometimes particularly our own. The South African regime of the early 1960s understood all too well the power of Nelson Mandela as a leader of the struggle against them and sought to crush this potency entirely. They imprisoned him on an island and tried to completely suppress all images of him, let alone anything he said or wrote. Yet in the act of this attempted burial, they made him more powerful than they could possibly have imagined. Nelson Mandela became the symbol that united the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa and across the world. The apartheid regime imprisoned for 18 months a man for having the words "Release Nelson Mandela" on his tea mug at work. But those words, that call, would become the clarion call for the entire world. And this is a coffee cup that Heart produced, and we sold quite a few copies, Mr. Speaker. It actually has a picture of Nelson Mandela. It's the last picture that we had at that time, taken, I think, in probably 1964, before he was imprisoned. And it was a shock to see an old man walk from Pollsmoor prison, robbed of 27 years of his life. He rescued his country from spiralling into civil war and then set about forging a new nation based on the ideal of a place where everyone belongs, a rainbow nation. That ideal had been one to which Nelson Mandela dedicated his life, and as he said, one for which he was prepared to die if need be. That ideal is not yet realised, Mr. Speaker, and others must take up his burden more convincingly than some of his successors have done. In the year 2000, I was present at the closing ceremony of the World AIDS Conference in Durban. It had been a fraught conference dominated by Thabo Mbeki's denial of access to anti-HIV treatments, based on his misplaced idea that HIV was not the cause of AIDS. And Nelson Mandela used his speaking slot at the closing ceremony to comprehensively rebut Mbeki's position and to skillfully unite the conference in a position on access to treatments that has saved many, many lives. The other occasion I had the privilege of seeing him in person was at a gathering of some from the anti-apartheid movement in St Matthews in the city in 1995. Nelson Mandela had sought the opportunity to specifically thank the anti-apartheid movement in this country for our support and contribution in bringing justice to South Africa. If anything binds this country to Nelson Mandela and to his legacy, it is the work of the anti-apartheid movement. I know a number of members of this House took action to oppose apartheid, and literally hundreds of thousands of other New Zealanders did the same. We took that action in defiance of our government of the day, which tacitly supported and lent comfort to the apartheid regime. Very often we took that action in defiance of the law, believing that we served a greater good. And I'm proud of those actions, Mr. Speaker. And now, today, I stand here not only on behalf of the Green Party, but with a sense of those hundreds of thousands standing with me, shoulder to shoulder, arms linked, to wish you well, Nelson Mandela, on your voyage to the stars. Nelson Mandela, we fought for your freedom from the other side of the world, and now we mourn you from here. We celebrate your life, and we vow to keep alive your belief in redemption, truth and reconciliation, and good lives and a fair future for everyone.
Speaker.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Mr. Speaker, Nelson Mandela